I'm Audrey Parker, 28, and I just buried my father 4 days ago. For 6 years, I've poured my heart into our family real estate business, learning every detail under Dad's patient guidance. Today, I walked into our office to find my sister-in-law, Diane, sitting at my father's desk telling our employees she's taking over. Her cold eyes locked with mine as she said those crushing words, "You need to leave. You're in the way now." I felt my world collapse for the second time this week. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you thought was family. I promise this story will show you how to rise above even the most painful betrayals. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds in my apartment as I stared blankly at the ceiling. Sleep had been a stranger since Dad's heart attack just 9 days ago. Harold Parker had been my hero, my mentor, and my best friend. At 59, he was supposed to have decades of life ahead of him. We had plans, dreams for the future of Sunridge Properties, the real estate company he'd built from nothing 25 years ago. I dragged myself out of bed and opened my closet, pulling out the navy blue blazer Dad had given me when I first joined the company 6 years ago after graduating with my business degree. "Every good real estate agent needs a power blazer," he'd said with that warm smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. The memory made my chest ache. Sunridge Properties wasn't just any real estate company. In a market dominated by corporate giants, we'd maintained a reputation for personalized service and integrity. Our 35 employees weren't just staff, they were an extension of our family. Dad had built the business on relationships, not just transactions. I remember my first day how nervous I'd been despite growing up around the business. Dad didn't give me special treatment. I started at the bottom, learning every aspect from administrative tasks to closing deals. "You can't lead what you don't understand," he'd tell me. By my 3rd year, I was managing our residential division. By year 5, Dad had made me director of operations, grooming me to eventually take his place. My brother Jason had chosen a different path. 3 years older than me at 31, he'd always been drawn to medicine. Now a successful pediatrician, he respected the family business but had no interest in running it. "That's your and Dad's thing," he'd say. "I've got enough stress with sick kids." Jason had married Diane Collins 4 years ago. Tall, immaculately styled with an MBA from Wharton, Diane had always struck me as intensely ambitious. She worked as a management consultant, parachuting into struggling companies to optimize operations, a euphemism I'd learned for mass layoffs and restructuring. I'd always sensed a competitive edge when she spoke to me, but I'd chalked it up to professional rivalry and tried to maintain a cordial relationship for Jason's sake. It wasn't until about 8 months ago that Diane started showing an interest in Sunridge. She began asking detailed questions about our business model at family dinners, inquiring about our growth strategy and profit margins. Dad, always generous with his knowledge, happily discussed the business with her. "Your sister-in-law has quite the business mind," Dad had commented after one Sunday dinner. Jason found himself a sharp one. I'd nodded, but something in Diane's intense questioning had unsettled me. It wasn't curiosity, it was assessment. Those memories flooded back as I drove to the office for the first time since the funeral. Dad and I would usually carpool, stopping for coffee at Franklin's, the local cafe where he knew every employee by name. Today I went through the drive-thru alone. The heart attack had been sudden. 1 minute Dad was showing a luxury property to clients, the next he was on the floor. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. The doctors said it was quick. Small comfort when your world has shattered. The funeral had been a blur of faces and condolences. I remembered Diane standing next to Jason, her black dress impeccably tailored, her hand gripping his arm as she accepted condolences, as though she, not I, had been the closest to Dad. "We're devastated," she'd told people. "Harold was like a father to me. 3 days of bereavement leave had done little to heal the raw wound of grief, but I knew Dad would want the business to continue. He'd built something that supported dozens of families, including mine. As I pulled into my parking space at Sunridge Properties, I took a deep breath. "I'll make you proud, Dad," I whispered, not knowing how soon that promise would be tested. The first sign that something was wrong came when I entered the building. Angela, our receptionist for the past 8 years, gave me a strange look as I approached her desk. "Audrey, I didn't expect to see you today," she said, her usual cheerful greeting replaced by obvious discomfort. "I couldn't stay away any longer," I replied, forcing a small smile. "Too quiet at home with just my thoughts. How's everyone holding up?" Before Angela could answer, Thomas Green, our CFO and one of Dad's oldest friends, emerged from the hallway. His face registered surprise, then what looked distinctly like concern. "Audrey, can I have a word?" His voice was low, urgent. "Sure, Thomas. Let me just put my things in my office first." "Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about." A chill ran down my spine. As we walked toward the executive wing, I noticed unusual activity. People carrying boxes, unfamiliar faces in suits consulting clipboards. We rounded the corner to Dad's office. My office now, I had assumed. And I stopped cold. Through the glass walls, I could see Diane standing in the center of the room directing workers who were removing Dad's paintings from the walls. His beloved vintage sailing maps were already gone, replaced by modern abstract art. His desk, the solid oak desk where he'd taught me to review contracts, had been pushed to the side waiting to be removed. Without thinking, I pushed open the door. "What's going on here?" Diane turned, her surprise quickly masked by a composed smile. She wore a crisp white blouse and charcoal pencil skirt, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Audrey, I didn't expect you back so soon." "Clearly," I said, staring at the workers dismantling my father's legacy piece by piece. "What are you doing in Dad's office?" Diane's smile tightened. "I'm making necessary changes. This office needs to reflect its new occupant." "New occupant?" The words felt like ice in my veins. "Yes, as the new CEO of Sunridge Properties, I need a workspace that promotes efficiency and forward thinking." The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "New CEO, Diane? What are you talking about? Dad was grooming me to take over. I've been running operations for years." Diane's laugh was light dismissive. "Audrey, following your father's instructions isn't the same as having real business acumen. Sunridge needs experienced leadership to survive in today's market. As the only real business person in the family, I'm stepping up." "The only real business person?" I felt heat rising to my face. "I have a business degree. I've worked here for 6 years. Our quarterly profits are up 15% under my management." "Under your father's management," Diane corrected. "You were just implementing his vision. Now it's time for a new vision." She turned to one of the workers. "That desk needs to go. I've ordered a glass one to replace it." Thomas cleared his throat beside me. "Diane, perhaps we should discuss this transition more thoroughly." Harold had specific intentions for succession, which weren't formalized. Diane cut in smoothly. "I've already spoken with legal. Without explicit documentation, leadership falls to qualified family management." She gave me a pointed look. "Jason and I have discussed this at length. He agrees I'm the right person to preserve his father's legacy." My brother's name hit like a slap. "Jason agreed to this, without talking to me. He understands business needs to be separated from emotion. Speaking of which..." Diane glanced at her watch. "I'm calling a company meeting in 10 minutes to introduce myself as CEO. I suggest you take more time to process your grief before returning to work. Your emotional state could be disruptive." I stood frozen as she brushed past me. Through the glass walls, I could see employees gathering their faces, confused, concerned. Cassandra Wilson, our top agent who'd been with Dad since the beginning, caught my eye with a look of genuine alarm. "Thomas, what's happening?" I whispered. The older man placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. I don't know, Audrey. This is the first I'm hearing about Diane taking over. Your father never mentioned this to me. Because he didn't plan it, I said, my shock giving way to anger. I need to talk to Jason. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called my brother. The call went straight to voicemail. I texted, "Why is Diane claiming she's CEO of Sunridge? Call me now." Through the glass, I could see Diane standing confidently before the gathered employees. Even without hearing her words, I could read the surprise and confusion on their faces. Some looked back toward Dad's office, spotting me. A few nodded in solidarity, but others quickly averted their eyes. As the impromptu meeting dispersed, Cassandra made her way to me, her normally composed features tight with concern. "Audrey, what's going on? Diane just told everyone she's taking over as CEO effective immediately." "Apparently my brother thinks that's a good idea," I said, still staring at my silent phone. That's not right," Cassandra said firmly. "Everyone knows Harold was preparing you to take over. You've earned that position." Before I could respond, Diane reappeared at the door. "Audrey, I think it's best if you take the rest of the week off. Your office is being repurposed as our new digital marketing center. We'll figure out a suitable role for you once you're in a better emotional state." I felt my face flush with anger and humiliation. A suitable role? This is my family's company. "It's the Parker family company," Diane corrected smoothly. "And as Jason's wife, I am family. Now please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." As she walked away, I stood in my father's half-dismantled office, surrounded by the pieces of his legacy being carelessly boxed up and removed. I moved to his desk and pulled open the drawer where he kept important documents, only to find it empty. "She had I change all the passwords this morning," Thomas said quietly, "and she's already been through the files." The betrayal cut deep, made worse by my brother's apparent complicity. As I left the building that day, the weight of loss doubled on my shoulders. First my father, and now the company we'd built together. 1 week after my father's funeral, Sunridge Properties had transformed into a place I barely recognized. Under Diane's leadership, company policies were changing at a dizzying pace. The family-friendly atmosphere that had defined our workplace culture was replaced by cold corporate efficiency. I'd reluctantly returned after 3 days, finding myself relocated to a windowless office that had previously been a storage closet. My executive access had been revoked, my team reassigned. My new title, Family Brand Ambassador, a meaningless position created to sideline me while maintaining appearances. From my diminished position, I watched in horror as Diane systematically dismantled everything my father had built. The first casualties were the employees most loyal to Dad and me. Marguerite from accounting, who'd been with the company for 18 years, was let go for redundancy reasons. Sam, our property manager, who'd started as Dad's assistant fresh out of college, was replaced by Kyle, a friend of Diane's with half the experience and twice the salary. "It's nothing personal," Diane had announced in an all-staff email. "Just necessary restructuring to remain competitive in today's market." But it felt deeply personal to those losing jobs they'd held for years, and to me watching my father's extended work family being torn apart. The changes went beyond personnel. Sunridge had always focused on building relationships with clients, taking time to understand their needs and finding perfect matches. Under Diane's direction, the focus shifted to high-volume transactions, quick sales, minimal service, maximum profit. Agents were given sales quotas and scripts to follow, turning the personalized experience into an assembly line. I tried calling Jason repeatedly, but his responses were brief and evasive. "Diane knows what she's doing," he texted after my 5th attempt. "The business world is changing. Dad's approach was becoming outdated." It felt like a betrayal of everything our father stood for. Harold Parker hadn't built Sunridge just to make money. He'd created a company with values, one that served the community while providing for our family. Jason had never been interested in the business, so how could he suddenly have such strong opinions about its direction? The answer became clear when I overheard Diane on the phone in the break room. "The initial changes are just phase 1, she was saying to someone. "Once we streamline operations and cut the dead weight, the valuation will increase substantially. I'm thinking we could be acquisition ready by Q3. My blood ran cold. She wasn't trying to run Sunridge. She was preparing to sell it. That afternoon, I tried to access the company's financial reports, only to find my permissions revoked. When I approached Thomas about it, he glanced nervously over his shoulder before speaking in a hushed tone. "Audrey, be careful. Diane's watching who talks to you. But you should know, there are some financial decisions being made that—" He hesitated. "That your father would never have approved." "What kind of decisions?" "I can't say more right now. Just start documenting everything. And check your father's will again. There must be something there about succession." Before I could press him further, Diane appeared, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Thomas, I need those projections for the bank meeting," she said smoothly. "Audrey, shouldn't you be calling clients to reassure them about our transition? That is your job now, isn't it?" As Thomas hurried away, Diane's smile dropped. "I've noticed you spending a lot of time with the financial team. As a brand ambassador, that's hardly necessary, is it?" "I built relationships with those clients," I replied. "I want to make sure they're being taken care of." "They're being taken care of more efficiently now," Diane said. "Your father's approach was charming but outdated. This company needs to evolve to survive. Is that why you're firing people who've dedicated their careers to Sunridge to evolve?" Diane's eyes narrowed. "I'm making necessary changes to a failing business model. Your father was too sentimental about this company. Sentiment doesn't generate profit." The casual dismissal of Dad's legacy made my hands shake with anger. "This company has been profitable for 25 years because of that sentiment, because people trust us." "Trust doesn't scale," Diane replied coldly. "And neither does your father's mom-and-pop approach to real estate. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a business to run." As she walked away, I noticed Cassandra watching the exchange concern etched on her face. Later, she found me in my closet office. "Audrey, something's not right," she said, closing the door behind her. "Diane's been meeting with representatives from Westfield Corporate Holdings. They're known for buying family businesses, stripping them down, and absorbing their client lists. She's planning to sell Sunridge." I said the suspicion I'd harbored now confirmed. "That's not all," Cassandra continued, lowering her voice. "She's been telling people you're emotionally unstable since your father's death, that you've been making erratic decisions, and that's why she had to step in." The character assassination stung almost as much as the corporate takeover. Not only was Diane stealing my birthright, but she was also destroying my reputation in the process. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by old photos of Dad and me at various company events. In one, we were cutting the ribbon on our second office location. In another, accepting a community business award. These weren't just business milestones. They were family memories. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Diane says you're interfering with her leadership. Please stop making this difficult." No concern for how I was feeling. No acknowledgement of what was being taken from me. My own brother had become a stranger dancing to Diane's tune while our father's legacy was being dismantled. I texted back, "When did money become more important than family than Dad's memory?" His response came hours later. "Diane has a vision for the company. I trust her business judgment." But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, something I was missing. Why had Dad never formalized a succession plan if he'd been grooming me to take over? It wasn't like him to leave something so important to chance. With that question burning in my mind, I made a decision. If Diane wanted a fight for Sunridge Properties, she would get one. I wouldn't let my father's legacy be sold off to the highest bidder without discovering the truth first. 2 weeks after the funeral, the situation at Sunridge had deteriorated further. My tiny office now lacked even basic supplies. My requests for printer access and business cards mysteriously lost in the system. Diane had removed me from all client email threads and strategy meetings. I was being systematically erased from the company. The morning staff meetings had become a daily exercise in humiliation. Diane would ask for my input only to immediately dismiss my suggestions as outdated or lacking vision. When I presented data showing our client satisfaction scores dropping under the new policies, she cut me off. "Audrey's still clinging to her father's way of doing things," she told the room with a condescending smile. "Change is difficult for some people to accept, especially during grief. Let's move on to productive discussions." The dismissal was calculated to undermine my credibility while making her appear compassionate. Several employees shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. Fear had replaced the family atmosphere Dad had cultivated for decades. After one particularly brutal meeting where Diane had publicly questioned my professional capabilities, Cassandra found me in the break room trying to compose myself. "This isn't right," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "I've been tracking the sales numbers Diane's reporting to the board versus our actual transactions." I opened the folder to find meticulously documented discrepancies. "She's inflating the success of her new policies," Cassandra nodded, "and hiding the client complaints. 3 major accounts have already left because of the new approach, but the board hasn't been informed." This was the evidence I needed to start building a case, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. I needed to understand my legal standing, which meant I needed to know exactly what Dad's will said about Sunridge. That afternoon, I visited Walter Greenfield, our family lawyer and Dad's golf buddy for 20 years. His downtown office was cluttered with legal texts and family photos, including several of him and Dad at charity events. "Audrey, I've been meaning to call you," Walter said, embracing me warmly. "How are you holding up?" "Not well," I admitted. "Walter, Diane has taken over Sunridge. She's claiming there was no formal succession plan, and that as Jason's wife, she has the right to lead the company." Walter's bushy eyebrows shot up. "That's not my understanding of your father's wishes at all." "So there was a succession plan." "Of course there was. Harold was meticulous about these things." Walter frowned, adjusting his glasses. "The will reading was scheduled for next week. I assumed everyone was respecting the traditional mourning period before addressing business matters." My heart sank. Diane didn't wait for the reading. She moved in the day after the funeral. Walter's expression darkened. "That's highly inappropriate. The will explicitly addresses Sunridge's leadership succession." "What does it say?" I leaned forward anxiously. "I can't reveal the specifics until the official reading, but I can tell you your father made his intentions very clear." Walter hesitated. "Audrey, there's something else. Your father left a sealed letter with instructions that it be opened 1 month after his death. He was very specific about the timing." "A letter. What does it say?" "I don't know. It's sealed." Walter checked his calendar. "That would be a little less than 2 weeks from now." I felt a mix of frustration and hope. "I'm not sure Sunridge will still exist in 2 weeks. Diane's already meeting with potential buyers." Walter looked genuinely alarmed. "That would be a direct violation of the estate terms. No assets are to be sold or transferred until the will is executed." "Can we move up the will reading or open the letter early?" Walter shook his head. "The will reading is already scheduled for the earliest possible date given the legal requirements. As for the letter, your father was adamant about the timing. He said you'd understand when the time came." I left Walter's office with more questions than answers, but with one certainty: Dad had not intended for Diane to take over. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to confront my brother directly. Jason agreed to meet me at a coffee shop halfway between his medical practice and Sunridge. When he arrived, I was shocked by his appearance. My normally well-groomed brother looked tired with dark circles under his eyes and his shirt slightly rumpled. "You look terrible," I said as he slid into the booth across from me. 60-hour weeks will do that," he replied, avoiding my eyes. What's so urgent, Audrey? I have patients waiting. Diane is destroying Dad's company, I said bluntly. She's fired half the long-term staff she's meeting with corporate buyers, and she's telling everyone I'm too emotionally unstable to lead. Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. Diane knows business. She's making necessary changes. Necessary for what? I interrupted. For selling off Dad's legacy to the highest bidder, is that what you want? It's not that simple, Jason said, his voice low. Sunridge isn't as financially sound as Dad led everyone to believe. Diane discovered some issues. What issues? Dad ran a transparent operation. Thomas would have told me if there were problems. Jason fidgeted with his coffee cup. Diane says Thomas has been covering up declining revenues. That's why she's restructuring, to save the company. I stared at my brother in disbelief. And you believe that without seeing any evidence, Thomas was Dad's friend for 30 years. He's the most honest person I know. Diane showed me the numbers, Jason insisted, but wouldn't meet my eyes. Did you actually look at them, or did you just take her word for it? His silence was answer enough. I leaned forward, trying to understand what had happened to my brother. Jason Walter told me Dad had a specific succession plan in his will. Did you know that? A flash of surprise crossed his face. Diane said there wasn't anything formal, that as the only family member with advanced business training, she was the logical choice. And you didn't question that, didn't think to wait for the will reading. Jason's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood abruptly. I have to go. Emergency at the office. As he turned to leave, I grabbed his arm. Jason, Diane has been planning this takeover for months. I think she's manipulating you. For a moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. Then his expression hardened. You're upset about Dad. I get it. But don't drag Diane into your grief. She's trying to save what Dad built. As I watched him hurry away, I realized that confronting Diane directly would be useless until I had more evidence. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but I still didn't have the full picture. What I did know was that Diane had a history I hadn't been aware of. That evening, I researched Diane's business background beyond what she'd shared at family gatherings. What I found was illuminating. Before marrying Jason, she'd been involved with 3 family businesses that were subsequently sold to larger corporations. In each case, she'd entered the company through personal connections, implemented aggressive modernization, then facilitated a lucrative sale. The pattern was clear. Sunridge wasn't the first family legacy Diane had targeted. It was simply the latest in her business acquisition strategy. And my brother, focused on his medical career and blinded by either love or ambition, was her unwitting accomplice. As I continued digging, Thomas called. His voice was hushed, urgent. Audrey, I've been comparing our books from before Harold's death to now. There are discrepancies. Large ones. What kind of discrepancies? Funds being moved between accounts, client deposits being held rather than processed. Nothing overtly illegal yet, but heading in a concerning direction. Can you document this? Already am. But Audrey, be careful. Diane's watching me closely. I think she suspects I'm not fully on board with her plans. The warning was timely. The next day, Diane called me into her office, Dad's office, where the transformation was now complete. All traces of Harold Parker had been erased, replaced by sterile modern furniture and abstract art. Audrey, I've been patient with your adjustment period. Diane began gesturing for me to sit across from her glass desk. But your continued resistance to the new direction is becoming problematic. I wasn't aware I still had enough influence to be problematic, I replied evenly. You've been questioning my decisions to staff, undermining my authority, and I hear you've been meeting with Walter Greenfield. Her tone hardened. Let me be clear. If you can't adapt to your new role and support the company's direction, there won't be a place for you at Sunridge at all. The threat hung in the air between us. I thought of all the employees who'd already lost their jobs, of Dad's legacy being dismantled piece by piece. But I also thought of Walter's revelation about the will and the mysterious letter. "Are you firing me?" I asked, meeting her gaze steadily. Diane's smile was cold. "Consider this a final warning. Fall in line or clear out your desk. Family connection only extends so far." As I left her office, I knew I was running out of time. The will reading was still a week away, and Diane was accelerating her plans. I needed allies, evidence, and a strategy if I was going to save Sunridge from her predatory scheme. 1 month after my father's funeral, Diane called an all-company meeting. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense. More unfamiliar faces than familiar ones now, thanks to her aggressive hiring and firing campaign. I sat in the back, painfully aware of my diminished status. Diane stood at the front, sleek and confident in a designer suit. "I've called you all here to share exciting news about Sunridge's future," she announced. "After careful consideration of market conditions and growth opportunities, I'm pleased to announce we're entering acquisition talks with National Realty Partners." A murmur ran through the room. National Realty Partners was a corporate giant known for buying family businesses, absorbing their client lists, and discarding the rest, including most employees. This strategic partnership will allow Sunridge to scale nationally while providing enhanced resources and technology, Diane continued smoothly. The transition will begin next month, with the formal acquisition expected to complete by quarter's end. I felt the blood drain from my face. She was selling the company, my father's life's work, my professional home, without even waiting for the will reading. "Are there questions?" Diane asked, her tone suggesting there shouldn't be. Against my better judgment, I raised my hand. Diane's smile tightened as she acknowledged me. "Audrey," I stood aware of all eyes on me. "What happens to our employees under this acquisition?" "National will evaluate current staff for potential retention," Diane replied vaguely. "Those who align with their corporate culture will have opportunities." "So most people will lose their jobs," I translated, "and our clients. Will they maintain the personalized service they've come to expect from Sunridge?" Diane's eyes narrowed. "Our clients will benefit from National's extensive resources. Change is inevitable in business, Audrey. Your father understood that. The invocation of Dad pushed me over the edge. My father built this company to serve this community, not to be gutted and sold off. He believed in relationships over transactions. He wouldn't recognize what you've turned Sunridge into." The room fell silent. Diane's composure slipped momentarily, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Your father's approach, while charming, was becoming obsolete. Sentiment doesn't generate shareholder value." "There are no shareholders," I exclaimed. "This is a family business. Our employees are like family. And that emotional attachment is exactly why you were never qualified to lead," Diane snapped. "Business isn't about feelings, Audrey. It's about results. Your father coddled you, letting you believe you had what it takes to run this company. You don't." The public humiliation was calculated to break me, but instead it crystallized my resolve. "You never cared about Sunridge or what it stands for. This was always about the profit you'd make selling it off." Diane's professional mask dropped completely. "Of course it was. Why else would I waste my time with this provincial little operation? I've restructured companies triple this size. Did you really think I wanted to spend my career in your father's outdated little kingdom?" The naked contempt in her voice stunned the room. Even her new hires looked uncomfortable. "Security," Diane called sharply. "Please escort Ms. Parker from the building. Her employment is terminated effective immediately." 2 men I didn't recognize approached. One took my arm firmly. "Don't touch me," I said, jerking away. "I can walk out on my own." Cassandra stood as I passed. "This isn't right," she said loudly. "Harold Parker wanted Audrey to lead this company." "Noted," Diane said coldly. "Anyone else who shares that sentiment is welcome to follow her out the door." I kept my head high as I was marched through the office I'd worked in for 6 years. As I passed Thomas's office, he gave me a subtle nod. a signal we'd arranged. He would continue gathering evidence from the inside. In the parking lot, the reality of what had just happened hit me full force. I sat in my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, and finally allowed the tears to come. Not just for the job I'd lost, but for my father's dream being corrupted, for the employees who depended on Sunridge, and for my own failure to protect what Dad had entrusted to me. I don't know how long I sat there before a tap on my window startled me. It was Jason, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "Get in," I said, unlocking the door. He slid into the passenger seat. "Cassandra called me. She said Diane fired you." "Now you care." I wiped at my tears angrily. "Where have you been for the past month while she's been destroying Dad's company?" Jason stared at his hands. "I've been blind, Audrey. So blind. Diane convinced me the company was failing, that her expertise was the only thing that could save it. She showed me reports' projections. Fabricated ones," I cut in. "Thomas has been tracking the real numbers. Sunridge was thriving under Dad's leadership." "I know that now," Jason said quietly. "Cassandra sent me copies of the actual financials, and last night I found something on Diane's laptop." My heart quickened. "What?" "Emails between her and National Realty dating back 8 months. Before Dad died. She's been planning this takeover since before we even knew Dad was sick." The timeline made horrible sense. Diane's sudden interest in the business, her detailed questions about operations, her positioning herself as a business expert in family discussions. "She's been manipulating both of us," I said. "Using your medical focus against you, making you think you couldn't understand the business side, and using my grief against me, making everyone think I'm unstable." Jason nodded miserably. "There's more. Tomorrow is 1 month since Dad died." "The letter?" I breathed. "Walter told me Dad left a sealed letter to be opened 1 month after his death." "Diane knows about it," Jason said. "I overheard her on the phone trying to convince Walter to let her open it early as acting CEO. He refused." A cold certainty settled over me. She's rushing the sale because she knows something's in that letter that could stop her. "The will reading is tomorrow too," Jason added. I think I've made a terrible mistake, Audrey. The admission was the first step toward healing the rift between us, but there was no time to dwell on it. "We need to get to Walter's office. Now." Walter seemed unsurprised to see both of us arrive at his office unannounced. "I was about to call you," he said, ushering us into his private office. "Today marks 1 month since Harold's passing." He unlocked a cabinet and removed a sealed envelope with, "To be opened 1 month after my death," written in Dad's distinctive handwriting. "Should we wait for Diane?" Jason asked uncomfortably. Walter's expression was grave. "Your father was specific about who should be present. The letter is addressed to Audrey and Jason Parker only." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside, recognizing Dad's handwriting immediately. "My dear children," I read aloud. "If you're reading this, I've been gone for 1 month. I hope you've had time to begin healing, because what I'm about to share may be difficult to hear. For the past year, I've been aware of Diane's interest in acquiring Sunridge for resale. Through business connections, I learned of her pattern with other family companies. I chose not to confront her directly, but instead to prepare for the possibility that she might make a move after my death. Jason, I know your focus is medicine, not business, and I respect that choice. But I fear your wife sees Sunridge as nothing more than a business opportunity. I hope I'm wrong. Audrey, I've been preparing you to lead not just because you're capable, though you are, but because you understand that Sunridge is more than a profit center. It's a community, a family. To protect what we've built, I've taken legal steps that will activate upon the reading of my will. The succession plan is clear. Sunridge Properties is to be led by Audrey Parker as CEO with a board of directors, including Jason Parker, Thomas Green, and Walter Greenfield. Furthermore, I've established a trust that controls 75% of Sunridge's shares. This trust stipulates that the company cannot be sold for a minimum of 5 years after my death, and any sale must be approved by a unanimous board vote. I'm sorry for the pain this situation may have caused you both. Remember that business decisions can be fixed, but family bonds need nurturing. Whatever has happened in the month since my passing, I urge you to find your way back to each other. With eternal love, Dad. Silence filled the room as the implications of the letter sank in. Jason's face had gone pale. "She knew," he whispered. "She must have suspected something like this was coming. That's why she moved so quickly to establish control and push the sale through." Walter nodded gravely. "Harold came to me 6 months ago with concerns about Diane's intentions. The provisions in his will and this trust were his safeguards." "But they only work if they're executed," I said. "The will reading is tomorrow, but Diane's already announced the sale to National." "Then we need to stop her," Jason said with newfound determination. "I've been a fool, Audrey, but I'm with you now." For the first time since Dad's death, I felt a glimmer of hope. With the letter as proof of Dad's intentions, Jason's support, and the evidence Thomas and Cassandra had gathered, we had a chance to reclaim Sunridge and honor Dad's legacy. "We'll need to move quickly," Walter advised. "I suggest an emergency board meeting immediately following the will reading tomorrow." As we left Walter's office, I felt Dad's presence stronger than I had since his death. He'd known what might happen and had prepared for it, trusting that Jason and I would find our way through together. "I'm so sorry, Audrey," Jason said as we walked to our cars. "I should have trusted you, not her." "We'll make it right," I replied, squeezing his arm. "That's what matters now." The will reading the next day was a tense affair. Diane arrived flanked by her personal attorney, her confidence undiminished despite Jason's conspicuous absence from her side. He sat next to me instead, a united front that clearly unsettled her. Walter read through the standard provisions with professional detachment until he reached the section on Sunridge Properties. "Regarding the family business Sunridge Properties, Inc." He read, "I hereby establish the following succession plan. Audrey Parker shall assume the role of Chief Executive Officer effective immediately upon my death." Diane's composure cracked. "That can't be right." Walter continued without acknowledging her interruption. "A board of directors shall be established consisting of Audrey Parker as chairperson, Jason Parker, Thomas Green, and Walter Greenfield. Major company decisions require a majority board vote, with sales or acquisitions requiring unanimous approval." "This is the first I'm hearing of this," Diane interjected. "Harold never mentioned these arrangements. Furthermore," Walter pressed on Neon, "I have established the Parker Family Trust, which holds 75% of Sunridge Properties shares. The trust stipulates that the company cannot be sold or merged for a minimum of 5 years following my death." Diane's attorney leaned over to whisper in her ear, her face flushed with anger. "These provisions weren't disclosed when I began implementing changes at Sunridge. I've already entered negotiations with National Realty Partners, without legal authority to do so," Walter noted calmly. "Any agreements you've made are not binding, as you had no standing to negotiate on behalf of Sunridge Properties." "I am family," Diane insisted. "As Jason's wife." "You are family," I acknowledged, "but that doesn't give you the right to sell my father's company against his explicit wishes." Diane turned to Jason. "Are you going to let her talk to me like this, after everything I've done to save your father's failing business?" "The business wasn't failing," Jason replied quietly. "That was a story you created to justify your takeover. I've seen the real numbers now, Diane, and I've seen the emails showing you planned this before Dad died." The color drained from Diane's face. "You went through my private emails and found evidence of fraud," I added. "Manipulated financial statements, misrepresented authority funds diverted from client accounts." "That's slander," Diane's attorney warned. "It's documented fact," Thomas countered, producing a folder of evidence. As CFO, I've maintained records of all financial discrepancies since Ms. Collins began making unauthorized changes. Diane's confident facade crumbled completely. This is ridiculous. I was saving a company stuck in the dark ages. Harold's sentimental approach was holding Sunridge back from its true potential. That wasn't your decision to make, I said firmly. Dad built Sunridge on relationships and trust. Those values aren't outdated. They're the foundation of our success. An emergency board meeting has been called for this afternoon, Walter announced. As per Harold's will, the newly established board will address the unauthorized actions taken over the past month. Diane stood abruptly. This isn't over. National Realty's offer is in the millions. You're throwing away a fortune because of sentimentality. We're preserving a legacy, I corrected. Something worth more than any buyout offer. As Diane stormed out, her attorney, trailing behind the weight that had pressed on my chest for a month, began to lift. Dad had prepared for this possibility, putting safeguards in place to protect what he'd built. The emergency board meeting that afternoon was straightforward. The newly formed board unanimously voted to invalidate all changes made by Diane, to rescind the acquisition talks with National Realty, and to reinstate employees who had been wrongfully terminated. Jason, looking more like himself than he had in weeks, proposed a motion. I move that Audrey Parker be officially instated as CEO of Sunridge Properties, effective immediately in accordance with our father's wishes. The motion passed unanimously. As we left the meeting, Cassandra was waiting outside with several other long-term employees. Is it true? She asked hopefully. Are you taking over? It's true, I confirmed. And my first act as CEO is to invite everyone who was let go to return to their positions. The cheer that went up echoed through the office, drowning out the sound of Diane clearing out her things from what would once again be my father's office. And now mine. Jason approached as I watched Diane exit the building for the final time. She's moving out of the house, he said quietly. Our marriage was more of a business arrangement than I realized. I'm sorry, Jason. He shook his head. Don't be. It's better to know the truth even when it hurts. He squeezed my shoulder. Dad would be so proud of you, Audrey. You fought for his legacy when I couldn't see what was happening. We fought for it together in the end, I reminded him. That's what Dad would have wanted most. The next morning, I arrived early at Sunridge Properties. The building felt different already, lighter somehow, as if a dark cloud had lifted. I stood in the doorway of what had been Dad's office, now returned to its original state. His sailing maps were back on the walls, his oak desk centered in the room. Thomas appeared beside me. Welcome back, boss. It feels strange, I admitted, sitting at his desk. Harold always said that desk would be yours someday, Thomas replied. He believed in you completely. As employees began arriving, I noticed a different energy. Smiles returned, conversations flowed more freely. The family atmosphere that had defined Sunridge under Dad's leadership was already beginning to resurface. In the weeks that followed, we worked to rebuild what Diane had damaged. Client relationships were mended, with many expressing relief that Sunridge would remain a local family-run business. The employees who had been let go returned, bringing their institutional knowledge and relationships back to our community. 6 months after taking my rightful place as CEO, I sat at my father's desk, my desk now, reviewing quarterly reports that showed Sunridge not only recovering, but thriving. The trust Dad established had provided the stability we needed to weather the storm, and the board he'd selected offered the perfect balance of experience and innovation. The journey had been painful but transformative. Through the betrayal and struggle, I'd discovered strengths I didn't know I possessed. I'd learned to trust my instincts, to stand firm in the face of intimidation, and to fight for what mattered. Not just the business itself, but the values it represented. Jason had found his way back as well. Though his medical career remained his primary focus, He took an active interest in Sunridge's community outreach programs, helping establish a foundation in Dad's name to provide housing assistance to families in need. As for Diane, we heard she'd moved to Chicago to join a corporate restructuring firm. Her attempts to pursue legal action against Sunridge had fizzled when faced with the overwhelming evidence of her misconduct. Sometimes karma works exactly as it should. The healing process wasn't just professional but personal. For weeks after Dad's death, grief had consumed me so completely that I couldn't imagine finding joy again. The betrayal by Diane and temporarily by Jason had added layers of pain that seemed insurmountable. But gradually, with the support of the Sunridge family, I began to rebuild. Cassandra became not just a colleague, but a trusted friend. Thomas shared stories of Dad's early days building the business, filling in pieces of his history I'd never known. Even Angela from reception invited me to family dinners, knowing I was still adjusting to life without Dad. One innovation I implemented was the employee profit-sharing plan Dad had always talked about but never fully developed. Real estate isn't just about property, I told the team when announcing the plan. It's about people. About helping them find homes, build futures, create memories. Everyone who contributes to that mission deserves to share in its success. On the anniversary of Dad's death, I organized a company gathering, not a somber memorial, but a celebration of his legacy. We planted an oak tree outside the Sunridge office, a living symbol of the strong roots he'd established and the growth that would continue for generations. Standing under that sapling, I felt Dad's presence more strongly than I had since his death. Not as a painful absence, but as a continuing influence, a foundation upon which I could build something new while honoring what came before. The true measure of leadership isn't what you achieve, Dad used to say, but what you leave behind for others to build upon. Through all the pain and struggle, I'd come to understand the depth of that wisdom. The betrayal I'd experienced had taught me to trust my instincts but verify with facts. It had shown me the importance of establishing clear legal protections for what matters most. But most importantly, it had reinforced the value of authentic relationships over transactional ones, in business and in life. Today, Sunridge Properties stands stronger than ever, not despite the crisis we weathered, but because of it. We emerged with greater clarity about our values, stronger bonds within our team, and a renewed commitment to the community we serve. As I look out from my office window at the city my father loved, I'm filled with gratitude for the legacy he entrusted to me, not just a successful business, but a philosophy that values people over profit, integrity over expediency, and family both blood and chosen above all. To those of you facing betrayal or loss in your own lives, I hope my story offers some comfort. The pain you feel is real and valid, but it isn't the end of your story. Sometimes the darkest moments become the foundation for something stronger, more authentic, and more meaningful than what existed before. Have you ever had to fight for something that was rightfully yours? How did you handle betrayal from someone you trusted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggle. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the path forward requires us to stand our ground first.